bring the regular meeting of the Town of Culpeper Planning Commission to order. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Serio?
Here.
Mr. Clemens?
Here.
Mr. Fitzsimmons?
Here.
Ms. Schmidt?
Here.
Mr. Flanagan?
Here. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as written?
So moved.
All in favor? I'm sorry,
Second.
is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Comments and correspondence from citizens, visitors, and delegations in the audience. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on any matter not scheduled for a public hearing. Moving on to unfinished business.
No unfinished business at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Moving on to new business. Public hearings allow the commission to gather information from interested citizens on the agenda items. Citizens may speak in reference to each item on the agenda for a time usually limited to 3 minutes. Commissioners and staff may ask questions of anyone attending the hearing. Speakers are asked not to direct questions or comments to each other. Speakers are not allowed additional time for rebuttal. This is a hearing, not a debate. Questions may be directed to commissioners and community development staff during regular office hours. Moving to public hearing, Town Ordinance Amendment, Case 0-2025-002. Mr. Hopewell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start off, I just want to note that I will apologize in advance that this is a fairly dry presentation. It provides a high-level overview of our timeline and some of the changes that are being proposed within this ordinance amendment. For a more detailed summary, there is a recorded joint work session between the Town Planning Commission and the Town Council from January of this year that's available on the hub site. So if folks are looking for more information, I encourage them to review that. So as noted, this is our first public hearing at the Planning Commission on the proposed Unified Development Ordinance. Just wanting to run through a timeline of how we got here. This was initiated back in 2019 when Town Council approved funding for outside consultants to aid town staff in updating the town zoning and subdivision ordinances. Later that year, Duncan & Associates was selected as a consultant. Early in 2020, a zoning and subdivision ordinance advisory committee was formed, consisting of a variety of members representing different interests from the community, along with planning commissioners and town council's members. In February of 2022, staff and Duncan & Associates made a joint presentation to town council and the planning commission, providing an overview of the ordinance as it stood at that time with the draft. This also provided some background information into form-based code and some educational sessions related to that. In February of 2024, the town pushed out a hub site which contained summary tables of the draft zoning, uses and maps, and the ability for citizens to provide comments and feedback on proposed zoning related to specific parcels. Earlier this year in January, the full draft development ordinance was released for review and comment. January 21st, there was an overview presentation to the Town Planning Commission. The 28th was that joint work session with Town Council and Planning Commission that I referenced earlier that provided a detailed summary of the draft ordinance and the changes from our existing code. On February 13th, Town Council formally initiated the overhaul of the town zoning and subdivision ordinances in the form of a unified development ordinance. And that brings us to today when we're having the first public hearing at the Planning Commission level on this draft Unified Development Ordinance. As we move forward, I wanted to just give an outline of what's to come as far as meetings and opportunities to comment and ask questions related to the ordinance. Tomorrow morning, town staff will be presenting at the Culpeper Chamber State of the Community events on the draft. On Thursday, there's a presentation to the Board of Zoning Appeals on the update. Next Tuesday, March 25th, at the Town Council's 3P Committee, there'll be a presentation to the Town Council Committee related to this. That afternoon will be the first of a number of open houses here in the town's Economic Development Center related to the ordinance update, where citizens and interested parties are welcome to drop by and ask questions. Town staff will be on hand to discuss specific questions, specific concerns that citizens may have related to properties, take feedback at that time as well. March 27th, next week Thursday, the Town Planning Commission will hold a work session on the Unified Development Ordinance. And then we have a number of, as I said, open houses coming up. There's one a week between now and the first week of June, when Town Council is scheduled to hold their second public hearing. So April 3rd, there'll be an open house. April 9th, an open house. April 14th, an open house. April 15th of next month, at the regular scheduled Planning Commission meeting, there will be a second public hearing on the draft Unified Development Ordinance. The following week, Town Council's 3P Committee will again have another presentation and discussion of the draft ordinance. Later that afternoon is another open house. May 2nd will be an open house. May 8th we'll have an open house. May 12th we'll have an open house. May 13th will be the first public hearing before the Town Council on the draft ordinance. May 19th will be another open house. May 27th, another presentation and discussion with Town Council's 3P Committee, and that afternoon, another open house. June 2nd, an open house. June 9th, an open house. And June 10th is the second Town Council public hearing on the draft Unified Development Ordinance. So wanting to break this down, the presentation down into two portions. One focused on consistencies with the current code. There's a lot of things that are changing, but there are a lot of things that are remaining the same. So one of the things that's remaining the same are minimum residential lot sizes, widths, and setbacks. Town Council gave clear direction that they wish to proceed in that manner. The landscaping requirements are remaining consistent with our current requirements. The historic overlay district is remaining consistent with what we currently have. Our flood hazard areas, this is taken from template language from the state and so is remaining consistent with what we currently have. The subdivision design and improvement section is consistent with the current town code's subdivision ordinance. The majority of the procedures that we have, the way that different processes are handled, are remaining consistent with current policies, and that's all addressed in the draft section 27-12. Our violation, our penalties and enforcement sections are remaining consistent. And finally, the handling of nonconformities is remaining consistent with our current policies and with the state process that's outlined for nonconformities. So then we get into what is being changed, what is different in this new code versus our current code. The first are the zoning district categories themselves. As has been noted, we are proposing a complete overhaul of the zoning and the subdivision ordinance. So these are all new categories that are being introduced as far as the zoning districts. None of them are remaining consistent with our existing descriptions. They're all new. Additionally, we have the introduction of a building types section. This is particularly relevant to the next bullet point, where we're introducing form-based code for our mixed zone and non-residential development. The form-based code uses the building types as a way to establish what the form and structure of these buildings will be. It's a transition from our traditional zoning, where we focus primarily on the use and not so much on the form. This form-based that's being proposed for the non-residential and multifamily units within town offers a trade-off of essentially granting greater flexibility on the uses allowed in return for greater certainty of what the exterior form of the building looks like. This is an attempt to try and maintain the character that we have within particularly our downtown, but also our commercial parts of town. The new update proposes a clarification of our lighting standards in section 27-4. We're looking to significantly simplify our parking categories and ensure that those are consistent with the uses proposed. This is identified in section 27-5. One of the changes that is proposed is an increase in the required parking for single-family residential development. Currently, single-family residential development requires 2 parking spaces per unit. This is proposing to increase this to 3 parking spaces per unit, with at least 2 of those spaces being exclusive of the building. The reason for this is we've had significant concerns expressed from a number of our residential neighborhoods about overcrowding of parking on the streets, blocking the ability of property owners to put out trash cans, have mail delivered, things of that nature. So we're seeking to try and address that and remedy that a little bit as we move forward by ensuring that there's more off-street parking available with new development. Finally, also we have, or rather finally for this slide, we also have a simplification of our uses and use table. Currently, our use table has many of the uses that were incorporated in the original zoning when it was adopted in 1968. Many of these are very prescriptive and very specific in their definitions. What's being proposed is more performance-based uses, allowing greater flexibility to group uses with similar impact uses. What this means is that we do have some increased permissiveness of our commercial uses. As we discussed with the Planning Commission, this allows some greater flexibility. It does, though, allow certain uses that currently are called out and prohibited in certain areas. Things like tattoo parlors are grouped into the personal services category, and so conceivably would be allowed within our commercial districts where they're currently limited to industrial zonings. When we look at the effects of these and the similar ramifications, that's the district that they fit more cleanly within. The new code is proposing the addition of a definition explanation for recovery residents and clear guidance on where those would be permitted. It proposes some additional restrictions related to tobacco and vape stores and their proximity, particularly to schools. It's an update of the wireless facility regulations to comply with state code. We currently are out of date in that section. It allows accessory dwelling units or backyard cottages to be constructed by right within the residential zoning districts. Currently, those require a conditional use permit. So this is a way to try and increase housing affordability. The new code proposes a differentiation between home offices and home-based businesses within the home occupation permit process. And we see this as an important step in terms of updating the code and modernizing the code to recognize the increasing use of people running businesses out of their homes. Home offices would be allowed by right, where essentially there's no impact on the neighborhood, and limited home-based businesses would also be permitted through a process where currently they're largely prohibited. So this would be situations like tutors or music teachers, things of that nature, where there's limited impact on the community, but they would be permitted to be operated out of the home. The new code proposes clear definition and regulation of short-term rentals, limiting the locations within town that those would be permitted, as well as the process of registration for those particular properties and uses. There's an introduction of beekeeping standards. There's regulation of the location of drive-through facilities and fuel pumps, again with the form-based code seeking to relocate those to the rear of buildings. Increased specificity related to A-frame sign regulations, both in terms of number and locations of where they're permitted. Greater clarity in terms of how sign area measurements are calculated through the use of illustrations and greater graphics. A complete update of the watershed protection overlay. This was necessary because the existing language was drafted prior to the town of Culpeper opting out of the stormwater management regulations and deferring to the Department of Environmental Quality for that. So this updates it to be in line with current state code and current practice. New language related to major subdivisions and site plans, how those are approved. Recent legislation out of Richmond has prohibited the Planning Commission from being the approving agent on these applications, and so it's transitioning to staff being the approving agent. Language granting the zoning administrator greater ability to do administrative modifications. This is in line with Culpeper County for one, along with a number of other jurisdictions. Granting the zoning administrator the ability to grant administrative variances and modifications. This would require notification to adjoining property owners, and should there be opposition or concern expressed related to those, it would require a conditional use permit for the approval of that modification. There's greater clarity provided on measurements and definitions, citing more specific examples, more graphics, more images to clearly convey the methodology used for the various measurements and definitions. So wanting then to transition to changes and updates that have occurred since the original full draft was released in January. Again, town staff has been taking feedback and input. We've cleaned up a number of typos and ensured that we have consistent numbering. ensured we'd have consistency of terms, particularly related to semi-detached house. In some places it was listed as semi-attached house, so we ensured we have consistency there. We've included notations in the building type descriptions as to which zones may require a conditional use permit for that particular building type within the zone. We've removed language regarding alternate treatment of through lots. Upon closer inspection, it was a limited application that would be applied and seemed to be an unnecessary complication. We've included language for the allowance of buildings greater than 3 stories for a civic building through a conditional use permit process. We've limited the application of towers to civic buildings within the update. Refined language related to the lighting purpose and intent. Refined the lighting height standards to be consistent with our facility standards manual. We've added the RX zones to adjacent areas that require screening of loading areas, so they receive a similar treatment to other residential zones. We've removed the limited portion use indicator for building type uses, as is no longer applicable. That was a remnant from earlier versions of the code where there had been proposed simply limited portions of buildings could be used for certain uses. We've added language to ensure the mitigation of adverse impacts on surrounding properties is expected to be considered in use determinations by the zoning administrator. Provided clarification that short-term rentals are not considered part of the lodging group. That is seen as an accessory use to a residential dwelling. We've removed commercial food preparation from the prohibited uses list of home occupations. Reduced the time frame for short-term rental housing from 90 days to 30 days. Added an explanatory sentence in 27.7.90 related to foul units and the movement of the table to earlier in the section. These were a number of items that were discussed with the Planning Commission at their work session in January. We've added language permitting a parking structure to be the sole structure on a property if it's adjacent to the principal structure which it serves. Previously, a parking structure was only permitted to be an accessory structure. We've added the prohibition within the historic district overlay of residential dwelling units on the ground level of a building originally designed for non-residential use. This is consistent with our current code, but it had been omitted in the initial draft. As mentioned, we've completely updated the watershed protection overlay to align with the current Virginia State Code and the town's position as an opt-out locality. At the time of the first draft, we hadn't completed that language. We've removed accessory apartment definition and consolidated accessory building and accessory structure in the definition section. Expanded the developer definition beyond those of just subdividing property. Clarified that electrical vehicle parking space definition to make it clear that it's for the purpose of charging the vehicle. Removed the health official definition as the health official is not referenced anywhere else in the UDO, so the definition was unnecessary. One of the key changes that we made was where we had some inconsistencies related to between uses and building types as to where duplexes and townhouses would be located. So in some sections it said that the RT, the duplexes would be allowed in the NX, and other places it prohibited them. So the draft update has proposed that duplexes be allowed only in the RT and RX districts and removes the NX as an option for duplexes. It also proposes the townhouses being allowed by right in the RX and NX districts and in the RT through a conditional use permit. Finally, it also adds the general building and road types to the permitted building types in the RX district. This was an oversight because those buildings are permitted to accommodate multifamily residential, which is a permitted use within that building type. So again, this is the proposed zoning map that we have. At this time, we've not proposed any changes to the map. We have received a number of requests from property owners for changes. And with that in mind, I'll move on to where we go for the next steps. So our next steps are, first and foremost, is to conduct a public hearing this evening and to receive feedback from the public on the draft. We have the work session coming up next week, Thursday, where we'll certainly be discussing a number of the changes, and in particular, I'll be bringing to the Planning Commission the specific requests we've received from property owners for changes to the zoning designations of their properties. We've got the open houses coming up that we identified early on in the meeting, which will be chances for the public to drop into the building here, talk with staff, go through the specifics of their concerns and the specific implications of the changes to their property. We've got the two committee meetings with town council, or rather 3 committee meetings with town council coming up this month in April and in May. We have the second planning commission public hearing coming up next month, and then the 2 town council public hearings in May and June. To be clear, this is a work in progress. We certainly recognize that. The goal here is to make sure that this is reflective of the desires of the community. Both the planning commission and town council are under no obligation to act within the time frame identified here. This is simply the initial time frame that was identified to work through. So the goal is to make sure that we have it addressing the citizens' concerns, and for council then to be able to act on it and determine if it's in the best interest of the town to move forward with this update. So that concludes the presentation for this evening. Again, I apologize that it was so dry and lack of images in there, but there is much greater detail available for those who want to see an overview through the recorded session on the town's hub site. I'd be happy to take any questions from the Planning Commission if they have any prior to the public hearing.
Those open houses are what time?
They're proposed to be from 1 till 4 in the afternoon. Those dates are all also up on the town's hub site.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hopewell?
Point out that we've been discussing this together with the department for many, many, many months. So the fact that we don't have a lot of questions today doesn't indicate a lack of interest or a lack of engagement.
Just 5 years in the making.
Yeah, no, a lot of questions have been asked, and the response has generally been very thorough. And you can, I think it's indicative how many changes have been made just in the last month or so in response to feedback and input.
With that, I will open the public hearing. Please approach the podium, state your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Felicia Chavez. I live at 809 Southwest Street here in Culpeper, across the street. I'm a beekeeper. I own a shop by the name of La Vida Loca in downtown Davis Street. So one of the things that that brought me here was Section 27-7.100 and the proposed zoning ordinance. I've kept beehives in my home since 2015. I was raised around beekeeping as a small child and learned everything I knew from my parents and my family. I also have an observation hive at my shop. And according to what's being stated here, I would not be in compliance with any of this at all. We have maybe at the most at any one time at least 12 hives in our backyard. Right there, I'm out of compliance. I don't really see what a small little insect, a honeybee, would do to any neighborhood. I don't live in an HOA. What I do in my backyard is contained. I'm a good steward of my bees, my beekeeping, and my neighborhood. And I would hope that this wouldn't come to fruition. I really don't, because I don't see this as being a big deal. We have many beekeepers in Culpeper, and they as well. And at some point, we're all connected. And they've never had any issues. I've never had anybody have a problem with our bees or our beehives. But I did go ahead and I did make a couple of comments, and I would just hope that you would look at this and let it go. I don't think we need an ordinance. I don't, especially for beekeeping. Not only that, but they're the most important thing. If we start going ahead and doing this and structuring, homes that do have beekeeping, I'd have to do most of my beekeeping in the county because it wouldn't be allowed here in town for as many hives as I have, and it makes no sense. If we start controlling how many beehives we have, we're going to lose our bees, and bottom line is, you lose the bees, you die. It's as clear as that. I'm very passionate about beekeeping and teaching people about beekeeping and being good stewards of keeping those honeybees. So, as far as I'm concerned, I've got no issues other than I really wish you'd look at this and not include this in any kind of zoning here in town. We've been doing it since 2015 and we've never had a problem. That's it. I would like to go ahead and offer, as a thank you for listening to me and my ramblings, a small little idea of what we do at my shop. And if you haven't had a chance, then maybe you need to go ahead and check it out. I have many family members. I've been considered one of the 5 destination points in Culpeper, which brings a lot of revenue to town. So keep that in mind as well. It directly impacts my business. I'm going to leave these honey sticks. I would hope that you would take one. If you've never had honey, shame on you. But I'm going to go ahead, and if you take one, snip off the top.
Thank you.
And eat them at your leisure, put them in your tea. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lisa.
Sorry. Let someone else go.
I'm just going to ask everyone to speak as loudly as you can and into the mics so that in the other room we can hear you more clearly. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Juan Vargas, and I represent 4 properties in town. Located at 441 Aspen Street, 215 West Piedmont Street, 210 West Piedmont Street, and 214 Northwest Street. The one particular property that I'd like to talk about is 441 Aspen Street, which is located along Sparrowville Pike. With the new proposed map, I noticed that my property went from commercial 3, which is the highest of the 3 commercial levels. Yeah, commercial 1, 2, and 3. My property is C3, and it's proposed to become NX. Bottom line, I like my property to stay commercial. I don't want to downsize because I don't want to think about the future. I just want to stay commercial. Just like many other properties along 522 stayed and were untouched by this proposed map. And some of the properties that are staying commercial with this new proposal are Found and Son Funeral Home, West Side Grocery, and Culpeper Car Wash. That's only a few that I can see. There's somewhere along in that neighborhood. But bottom line, I would like my property to stay commercial the way it is now. With my other properties, there are 3, all of them, and I can see some similarities that intermingle with the new proposed zoning. So I can't really express whether I am against or for it. It looks pretty similar. I would like to look more into detail on what can and I cannot do with this new proposed zoning. So that's it. One quick question. All of the timelines for the hearings and open houses, are they posted on the website? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is David DeJarnett, and I represent 3 family-owned commercial properties, 505 Germanna Highway, 511 Germanna Highway, and 1710 Broad Street. I'm here to urge the Planning Commission members to reject the zoning overhaul project as presented by the town staff. My reasons are as follows. I have 4 points. The current zoning staff, as Mr. Hopewell pointed out, was asked to work on a project by previous zoning staff members to upgrade zoning codes. They were asked to address new issues for the town, possibly solar farms, data centers, and existing issues of recovery homes and parking codes. Instead of tailoring and upgrading suitable solutions to the current codes, staff decided to go in a new direction and use outside consultants, pre-written, pre-packaged zoning codes as written by groups such as the Form-Based Codes Institute and other outside consultants. The motto used over and over by this group, and the one written on the town website, is that they are using the time-tested forms of urbanism. These urban-based codes should not be applied to the town of Culpeper. Point number 2 is that in the step-by-step outline of the process to implement form-based zoning, the Institute and their many consulting firms state that these changes require community education and public buy-in of the process. The town of Culpeper general public did not really know about the process. Maybe they could have looked at the websites a little more closely, followed some of the meetings a little more closely. I, for one, retired a year ago. I wasn't aware that the process was in place. I probably should have. But anyway, the general public was not really aware that the process was occurring and may not be very knowledgeable about the future implications of these changes. Point number 3, in order to implement these codes, the entire town of Culpeper and every individual property is being rezoned/reclassified. 2 of our properties are being downzoned from the red color commercial to the light blue color of neighborhood mixed use. This limits the potential future uses of these 2 properties and reduces their values. The 3rd property is going from commercial down to residential mixed use and could likely lose around 40% of its value. Point number 4 is that the 270-page, 269-page document currently known as the UDO or the Unified Development Ordinance, if approved, it could be known as the Unintended Disasters Ordinance. It is far too technical to be fully understood by the citizens it is intended to serve, or even by the staff expected to use it. It will become 100 new ways to say no to new projects and can be used to force expensive retrofitting to current properties. I urge each of the Planning Commission members to vote to reject the current proposal, and I'd suggest a better alternative. The town government could use the next 6 months educating and informing the town citizens on the need for these changes and drafting a series of updated codes that could then be voted on in a public referendum with the November 2025 elections. Please do not pass this prepackaged program intended for cityscapes much different than the town of Culpeper. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Larry Geesty, and I live at 202 Gardner Street. My main concern this evening is the change in for Sperryville Pike and also for Colonel Jameson Way. It goes from being residential to being mixed use. And looking up the definitions of mixed use, somebody could come in and they could put a large entertainment venue in, a brew hall, restaurants, things like that. And right now, that area is completely residential, so it would change the entire character of the neighborhood and of the area. And I think that would probably adversely affect certainly property values, but the whole area. So my suggestion, my hope, is that you would maintain it as strictly residential. There is some businesses there, Sean's Barbecue and some other things up there. There's a grocery store, but there's also a lot of residential there, and I'm afraid that this would open the door to more businesses that maybe change the character of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Teresa Giesting, and I also reside at 202 Gardner Street. I've spent a couple of hours trying to figure out what all of these changes are going to mean, and I listened to the 45-minute work session, and I still am left with some questions. And one thing that I'm very opposed to, the industrial areas that are proposed seem to leave it wide open for data center development, because data centers are going to be allowed in the industrial by conditional use. Well, considering what has happened with the recent data center fiasco, and like the other gentleman said, the public really wasn't aware of what was going on, and by the time they found out and were able to study further the implications of what a data center actually means near a residential neighborhood, it was already pretty much a done deal. And I feel like that was kind of dirty business, and I don't know what really went on, but I'm opposed to having even any mention of data centers being allowed in any of the industrial areas in Culpeper. I realize that some of the parcels that are in the industrial area, they have current uses, but that doesn't preclude the owners of those properties selling to a developer who wants to conglomerate parcels to create a space for another data center. I just do not even want to see them as an allowable use, and I'm questioning why are they being even considered as an allowable use with a conditional use permit. The other question I had, which relates to temporary housing, I guess you said it's less than 30 days, and I'm unclear how properties like Airbnbs who are not, the owners are not on the property. It seems like in the proposed, a lot of things are covered under the bed and breakfast and some other categories which indicate that the owner is on the property. So I'd like a little more clarity, and I think we need to be educated as a community. I'm surprised there are not more people here. We need to really take this seriously, because if this is adopted, this means we're going to live with this for a very, very long time. So I would like to be informed of the work sessions that are coming up, because I need to be educated, and obviously I spent several hours trying to sort through all of these documents, the old, the new, and I'm still left trying to figure out and not sure. So I think I could be better educated if there were presentations that were understandable to the normal public. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Cindy Thornhill. I live at 1808 Stony Brook Road, Lane. I am opposed to making these changes. I think it has been an arbitrary decision on who selected which properties to change. Form-based zoning does not work in this rural community, and we're trying to force it into some prepaid consultants' visions. I am looking specifically at when you change industrial areas to neighborhood residential mixed use. I think that is an environmental nightmare in a lot of these industrial properties. I don't even see how you could make such a change, and there's some of those on the north end of town. I think that allowing buildings to go to 3 stories, I don't know how your fire departments can deal with that. I think allowing accessory structures by right is wrong. Who polices this? It is supposed to be for affordable housing. Typically, that's not how it goes. And it also allows, I think, a degradation of neighborhood visions and how the neighborhood looks if you do that. You're worried about adding from 2 parking spaces to 3 parking spaces for a residential home. That is pretty much out of the question without redoing your entire subdivision code allowance. Don't have private streets as a solution, but the driveways from the street into the house need to be bigger, longer, whatever, because you can't get 3 spaces on most of these new subdivisions that are coming in. So you need to make some considerations on that. But I think you also have in there a parking garage must adjoin the building that it serves. We are seeing some downtown expansion requirements. In the parking garage, there's no place to make it adjoin. So I think that is unrealistic. Bottom line, I'm against making all these changes. They are very difficult to follow and to implement. I think they will be something that staff is going to completely understand, but you as a volunteer planning commission member, it's going to be very hard, and the pushback on that will probably be a lot. So the last thing was there was a lot of changes that were changed from either public planning commission member approval to staff administrative approvals. I think that is maybe not in the best interest of the public. You represent the public as planning commissioners, and staff is going home at 5 o'clock, and he doesn't have to answer, or she doesn't have to answer to anybody. Those are things that I believe we need to maintain as a committee approval, or whatever you call your planning commission here. And bottom line, I am against this form-based zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm not sure if that's me or not, but I'll, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Joe Jacobs. I'm a property owner on Electric Avenue. I'm here to discuss some of the changes that have been made to the zoning map, and in addition, the permitted uses in the chart. I've been working with Mr. Hopewell for a few months, several months, Andrew, I'm not sure how many months, but he's been very good to work with, responded to all of my emails and all of my questions. But today I'm going to ask that, because we can't seem to get to a reasonable solution, that this zoning map and the ordinance not be approved. And I say that because what's happening is you've in the zoning map, my neighboring property has been changed to NX, which permits, among other things, townhouse development. And in the current ordinance, the zoning ordinance and the facilities manual, townhouses are required to be developed on private streets. My property is now going to remain, well, will be now called RS, which only permits single-family detached. And under the zoning ordinance and the facilities manual, you cannot have single-family lots except on a public street. So what essentially is happening is you're allowing my neighboring property to develop his property with private streets, and my property then cannot be developed because I'm required to be with public streets. So the facilities manual doesn't allow for public streets to connect to a private street to then connect to a public street. So they either need to be all public or they need to be all private. So I ask that either my property become NX so that the same uses could be applied to my property as my neighboring property, or the neighboring property be changed to the same use that my property is. The two properties are the only two in the area that are undeveloped, and it makes sense that if they're the last two properties to be developed, that they should be developed similarly. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Paul Bates, and I own multiple properties here in the town of Culpeper, several of which were, I guess we would say, are new neighbors of the town. We were annexed here a couple of years ago. The properties that I speak of start at 15441 Bragg's Corner Road and go over to 15358 Brandy Road, which essentially is from Culpeper Wood Preservers over to Route 666 and Brandy Road. Those properties, for as long as I can remember, have always been zoned heavy industrial. In this proposed rezoning, they are now going to be put into a neighborhood mixed use, which would mean that the current tenants that I have rented to for the past 15 years, would be non-conforming uses. I appreciate what council and town staff is trying to do, but it appears to me that we're using a very broad brush to go in and, as Mr. DeJarnett said, take something outside of Culpeper from a committee or a company that says, hey, this is what we need to do, versus people who live here making those decisions yourself. Case by case, I think common sense is prevalent here in the town and county, and we see what's going on, and if we need to change, as the gentleman spoke just prior to me, that, you know, let's look at this. If he's surrounded by this particular type of use, and if it needs to be rezoned, let's do it that way. But going in here with a broad brush and revamping the entire town, I just don't think that's a real good approach. I think that we really need to look at a case-by-case scenario. And back to the properties that I own, this M2, which again, I own the property across 1529 or Brandy Road, which used to be the old drive-in theater, which is now a very larger auto body shop, a Sunbelt rental. And that whole area next to Culpeper Wood Preservers down to past Quarles it's all industrial, and I just don't see. And I spoke with Mr. Hopewell, and he was understanding from the phone call, and he agreed that I don't think that's the best use to go with neighborhood mixed use. But again, outside of my properties, I do own property on Elizabeth Street, and I own property on Scanlon Street. I appreciate what you're doing when it comes to parking. We have a lot of issues in old neighborhoods in the town, that when we have multiple families that are living in one house, and you know, I guess the rule of thumb used to be if you had a house, you had a husband and wife, you had 2 cars. If you had a driveway that would accommodate 2 cars, you're good to go. Well, now when you have 3 and 4 families living in one house, that 2 cars now goes to 6 or 8. And you know, I think we have ordinances on the books that we can clean up a lot of stuff in the town and county if we just enforce what we have on the books. But I just don't think that a broad stroke going in here and doing a huge comprehensive rezone in the town is the answer. But I appreciate what you're doing, but I really hope that you take a deep delve into this thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, DJ Moberly, 19582 Cucarini Way. My wife and I do own property in the town of Culpeper off of Virginia Avenue. I just want to read something that I wrote and sent in to the town council, Mr. Hopewell. Dear town council members, Mr. Hopewell and Planning Commission, first and foremost, advertising this proposed zoning overhaul as a move from traditional zoning to a hybrid zoning, which includes form-based, is confusing and somewhat misleading in my opinion. The newly proposed zoning regulation still functions exactly the same way that the current regulation does, by separating parcels and areas to assign zoning classifications and applying by right uses to those classifications. The big difference that is being highlighted by claiming a change to include form-based, in fact, it's even been said that it's going to form-based. That's the impression everyone's getting. We're going to form-based. But really, what you're doing is you're adding a huge layer of architectural regulations into the zoning rules. The other big difference is obviously the introduction of the new zoning classifications. But I want to pause for a minute. So what we're doing is we're taking away property rights from property owners. And this is how it happens. Over time, we see red tape grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. These zoning ordinances did not used to have these regulations for property owners about architectural design, specifically the aesthetics. So what they've said is, we're going to carrot stick. We're going to give you a little more flexibility of what you can do, but now we're going to add on this whole new layer of legislation, this whole new authority arm essentially in the town, so that when someone that owns property that wants to make changes, suddenly now there's this new authority that's given to the zoning office to make sure that it's constructed just exactly the way they want it to be. And so as someone who's a home builder who has worked with the town before to try to get a site plan approved, it's already a very difficult process. And so I'll continue with my letter. The new zoning classifications have broadened use potentials, extending additional freedoms to property owners, and I favor that. But to that end, I believe this portion of the update to be positive. That said, the newly granted freedoms would open the door for new development, of which some would be residential by right uses. As the town is currently dealing with the population growth season, allowing these residential areas could create additional challenges with an influx of new residents in addition to what is being experienced without the code change. Is the town adequately prepared for the potential increase, and has that potential increase been forecasted? If you have not forecast the potential increase that this zoning changes would make, I would encourage you to please do so before making them. I believe that handing the town of Culpeper a new layer of regulation in regards to building form or aesthetics is a bad idea for a number of reasons. The new layer of regulation adds time and it adds money to the development process for starters. The time it takes the town of Culpeper to currently work with a property owner to navigate through site plan submission is already extraordinary. That's with a property owner hiring local engineers who have been dealing with this office for a long time. When you go and add a huge new layer of requirements, the time frame will be longer as the professionals work to tweak submissions to meet requirements and as the town staff reviews and responds to every minute detail. Further, many of the requirements can cost the property owners more money, and they may have had less expensive ways to accomplish their goals without these requirements. We don't need to be micromanaged. To many, these newly proposed aesthetic requirements sound almost like the town is setting out to be even more of an HOA than they already do. Do people tend to like HOAs? No, they do not. They particularly do not like being micromanaged by a policing force when it comes to their own property. Regulations like this boils down to being more red tape, more hassle, and even worse, it's an erosion of property rights. Individuals and private companies who seek to purchase a piece of property to build something special do not want or need the town of Culpeper to micromanage the aesthetics of how their property will look. We've come this far. When was the town of Culpeper established? We've come this far and we have so much beauty and character, and all of this has been done without a zoning office micromanaging the design. We don't need it in the future. The aesthetics of their property should be between a property owner and their architect. Local government needs to mind their own business, stay out of private property concerns. It's government overreach, and it needs to be prevented. Here are some examples of what the proposed town of Culpeper wants to have authority over. The roof type, the pitch, the shape. And I'll stop, I'm going too long probably, but I've listened to the presentation that was given in January, and one thing I thought was interesting was that the big chunk here is the form, is the aesthetic. But very little time was even spent in the presentation on all the many changes that they want to put into this. The roof type, the pitch, the shape, the height, the roof towers, the shadow lines, building entrances, the facades. What type of material are you using? Concrete on your shutters? Are you using cement? Are you using wood? What kind of all these things that they're trying to micromanage? We already have a building code to deal with. Now you want the zoning office to micromanage it. Beyond the many intricate aesthetic requirements, many of which I haven't mentioned, I want to point out Airbnbs, as you brought up tonight. The short-term rentals are being prohibited in some of the residential areas, and I think that you should spend more time thinking about that. A lot of property owners have used that, their own property for their income, and I think that they should be able to do that personally. I would strongly consider consideration of the removal of the aesthetic requirements from the proposed zoning overhaul. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker. Can't be done yet.
Let me check if there's any in the other room.
He's going to check the other room. Due diligence.
Can't rescind the gavel. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Gaston Villalobos. I speak in, my language original is Spanish, okay? But I live over here almost 10 years. It's hard for me, but I try to play, okay? Long time ago, the Columbia Gas start construction. You understand that, yes? But the problem, don't buy, the cost so 36% more. The people, what happened? Nobody answered that. I call Columbia Gas, okay? This is one problem. Another problem is special for everybody, same problem. The cost, the electricity is high, too much high here. In Maryland, my friend lived over there, same house, same big house, but the cost is not tremendous. This is too much. This is a question for every people, not for one people, two people, for every people. Especially the people Spanish, because I working for construction. You understand me? This is for me my problem, a problem the people Spanish here. It's only that. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Please state your name and address.
Yes, Jose Amaya, good afternoon. I represent 110 West Evans Street. The property, the building was built to be a car service. I don't know for how many years, I think it's for many. So, but the property is located in the C zone right now in red. And in the new proposal map is falling the NX mixed neighborhood, but the mixed neighborhood don't allow to use as car service or sales. So I think that will affect the building, right? So I'm a little worried about that, you know. So I don't know if my kids in the future like to continue with my business, and they will not allow to do the business. And then the building was built to be a car service, but the next zone don't allow to do that. So I like to keep, you know, the property as commercial. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak?
Good evening. My name is Sally Slaughter, and I'm not concerned about personal property. I'm concerned about Antioch Baptist Church where I attend. So I have not seen any plans referring to this church. So I would appreciate if I could see a copy of it so I could speak better about it. But is there any changes to the Antioch Baptist Church and its property next door, which is a barber shop? I'm waiting for an answer. Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's a good question. The
Is it on Route 3 going out?
it's West Street.
It's West Street.
Oh, okay.
Southwest Street.
I know where it is. Okay.
You know where it's
Well,
at?
yeah, it
Okay.
was. It was yellow, right? It is. Oh,
Is it going to
Okay, was it a historical
RX?
district, right?
no, it's oh.
Is it going to
It's
RX?
not now?
No, it's not in historical.
Never was. Sir, okay, all right.
It's
Okay.
going to RX, right?
It never was a historical district.
Don't get me wrong, it's historic,
Yeah.
Okay.
but it's
that's
not
it.
in the district.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Oh right, yeah. It's
It's historical.
it's
but
going to
not in
light.
the
It's
district.
going to NX.
It's going to what?
Looks like it's NX. It's 202.
Yes.
Ma'am, I think it'd probably be more appropriate if you want to reach out to me, and I can happily sit down with you
Sure,
and talk through it, but this is the public hearing, and so it's not.
That's fine.
not
I
the
had to start
chance.
somewhere. So do you have a
Absolutely.
card on you where I can call you?
I will certainly provide you with my information.
Okay, thank you.
I know,
Thank you
yeah.
for listening. Thank you
Certainly.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for
And your
speaking.
name?
My name is Andrew Hopewell.
Okay, thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Is there anyone in the other room who would like to speak? Check again.
I certainly can.
Public hearing is closed. Right, and moving to other business,
No other business discussed at this time, Mr. Chairman.
follow-up items,
No follow-up items at this time.
planning director discussion.
Yes, wanted to update the planning commission. There had been a request at the last meeting for,
You're asking that you use your microphones.
okay. There'd been a request for planning commissioner ID badges. Did talk to the IT department. We're happy to do that. We're able to do that. So actually, for those who wish to have them, we'll take pictures after the meeting against the white background. We'll get those to IT so that hopefully in the near future, we're able to have ID badges for the planning commissioners.
Okay. Planning commissioner discussion.
So we'll discuss these comments on Thursday, right, next week?
Correct. I'm anticipating at the work session next week to focus in large part on the property owner requests that we've received for changes to the maps. So we'll have maps and the commission can discuss those along with any other comments that have been received both here at the public hearing and that we've received via email to consider for updates.
Would it be, if I have a kind of a quick question, I can hold it till Thursday, or I guess I'll hold it till Thursday, or to the working meeting.
Okay. Commission members discussion. Mr. Serio? Mr. Fitzsimmons?
No, thank you.
Schmidt?
A couple things. I'd like to introduce Blake Ross, who's here from the Prince William County Planning Commission. Recognize him for being here for part of his planning commissioner certification.
Right.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Quite different from the meeting I attended the other night, so thank you for being here.
Still have time to feed us donuts.
Yeah, but we're meeting to talk to you about that.
And also to thank Louis for the site visit. We went out to Summer Station the other day. That was very worthwhile. Thank you.
Good.
That's it.
Okay. Mr. Clements?
I have nothing.
I have nothing.
Motion for adjournment?
So moved.